Howdy my totally tubular gamers, and today we're looking at Assassin's Creed. Now, Assassin's Creed is easily Ubisoft's most recognizable, iconic franchise, especially in the last 10 years or so. The Assassin's Creed franchise has way more games than any other franchise they have, and it's easily become the face of the company. Now, Assassin's Creed for quite a while was actually a yearly series. Like every year a new game would come out, and with that there's a lot of Assassin's Creed games. However, in the last year or so, I have actually played through all of the main series. Yes, all of the main series. Not only did I play through all of the main series, but I actually reviewed all of the main series. We're talking from Assassin's Creed 1 all the way up to Odyssey. I played all of them, and I just recently finished the latest, Valhalla. And so while I have played all of them, I thought it's time to do a ranking. We're gonna rank all of the mainline Assassin's Creed games. Now, this might get a little heated in the comments or whatever. This is just what I thought playing through all of them. As a preface, I didn't play all of them when they came out. I played them all literally back to back to back to back. A lot of them felt like the same game, in all honesty. There's a lot of similar things throughout these, but this is just what I thought. So we're gonna rank them, all the mainline Assassin's Creeds. We might be here a bit, so get some popcorn, get some alcohol, get whatever you're gonna get. Let's get right into the worst Assassin's Creed game, or at least what I perceive as the worst Assassin's Creed game. And at the bottom of the list for Assassin's Creed games, we have Assassin's Creed Unity, which I really think is the low point of the whole series. This was Ubisoft's first big game onto the new generation of PS4 and Xbox One. Sounds silly now, but it really felt like a big step backwards from Black Flag in a number of different aspects. Like, really a number of different aspects. The combat felt very neutered from the previous games, feeling a lot slower and honestly more in tone with like the original Assassin's Creed. I don't know why they went back. That's just weird. They went down to like one blade, one gun. It felt very stripped back. The parkour was not particularly great either, as it felt a lot clunkier, a lot slower, and they made the character like confirm a lot of actions. It was really odd. Like, it just wasn't very good, and the parkour's never been like that again, which is the weird part. They added a nice like climbing down feature, because climbing down buildings has never been good in Assassin's Creed, but the climbing down feature was nice. And I'm not gonna lie, some of the missions were actually pretty nice in Unity. There are some good things, but those good things are really peppered out across a very mediocre, shallow, not very good game that really just exposed Ubisoft and their "we gotta have a game every year" kind of thing. And don't even get me started on the technical issues that this game had and still has. Like, there's still tons of issues. The optimization's terrible, and the story, honestly, I wasn't really a fan of it at all. The protagonist, I was like, but the ending and like the last part of the game I thought was pretty poor. Now, Assassin's Creed Unity, really the low point of the series, and just not a fan at all. I know some people might still think it's pretty good and might think it's underrated, but that's not me. I don't think it's very good at all. Anyway, let's get to the next game. And the next Assassin's Creed we have is Assassin's Creed 3. Now, Assassin's Creed 3 I don't think is a bad game, but it is a very mediocre game with a very interesting time period. Like, I think the American Revolution was a very interesting setting, time period, and just the world in general was quite interesting, but that's really all the story is going for it. I was just not huge on the story as a whole. I don't think the characters are very good. Connor himself was just like, he just wasn't very good at all. And I think the pacing of the game is quite poor. I mean, the start of the game is kind of infamous for just being so slow and drawing, and honestly, by the time anything interesting is happening, you just kind of want the game to end. And a lot of the systems feel like they just weren't as good as they were in the previous Assassin's Creed games. Sure, they added like hunting and some new parkour stuff, but it just isn't as interesting. A lot of the other systems, like having your own like little assassin dudes, aren't even there, and a lot of the side content is just bad. Like, it's just very vanilla and bad. Just very stock Ubisoft open world crap. And this was actually the conclusion of Desmond Miles' story, the real life portion of Assassin's Creed, which always wasn't very good, and it's still not here. Like, all these years later, we still don't have a proper conclusion. I really don't know what's going to happen with the series that way, but it wasn't very good in Assassin's Creed 3. And then we get to my biggest issue, which was the blinding white light that was everywhere. Like, it truly was everywhere in this game. Whenever you pause the game, whenever you have a cutscene, whenever you have an interaction, whether it was just everywhere. I remember that there was this horrible blinding white light that really was blinding to me, and it really hurt my eyes. And I'm not trying to go blind, so I'm just going to end it there. Assassin's Creed 3. Let's get on to the next one. And here we are with Assassin's Creed Syndicate. So Assassin's Creed Syndicate isn't a bad game, or even like a mediocre game, but it's not all that great. It's okay at best, and the reason for that is Assassin's Creed Syndicate, if I could put it into one word, it's tired. It's tired, it's stale, and there's a lot of fatigue. Assassin's Creed Syndicate has a mildly interesting story about these two twins, the Fry twins, as they get into trouble around this cool new time period, the Victorian era. Yeah, it's all cool and stuff, and the time setting is cool, and the world is cool, and the grappling gun thing is cool, but it just is so stale. By this point, Assassin's Creed had really hit its stride already and was just on a downward spiral. And while Unity was bad and this was better, the formula was just so exhausted by now. And most people who played the game felt that way. It was just really stale. It's like, sure, the game had some decent combat and it had some decent missions and it even had an alright villain, but the just entire system of Assassin's Creed was just so done by this point. Like, it had been so overplayed. This was like the 10th game that was like this. It was like, we've had enough of this. Nothing is changing. I'm just playing the same damn game over and over. And that was my feelings when I played Syndicate. I just felt very fatigued and it just felt repetitive, honestly. And its systems were interesting for a little bit, but ultimately I just wanted the game to end. And the game doesn't do anything like horribly wrong. It just doesn't do anything interesting, which honestly just leads me to just have it even lower on this list, because it just didn't do all that much that I honestly liked. It was just like, yeah, the game's fine, and that's it. And here we have the original Assassin's Creed. Yes, the OG, the one that started it all. And while a lot of people could say that the original has not aged well, or it just kind of gets obliterated by like some of the other games, I think you got to cut it some slack. And it was the first one. It was the one that started it all. So, I mean, there's that. It was really Ubisoft's first big open world game. And as we know now, that's all they seem to want to ever make. So, there's that also. But the original Assassin's Creed actually has a lot going for it. Despite the quite poor real-life story, I thought the actual story in the Animus was quite interesting. And I thought Altair was pretty cool. He was literally just like this silent, kind of no-nonsense killer. And I thought that was quite good. The open world itself was different, and I thought that it was still actually quite interesting. Even all these years later, I think the game is still interesting for Assassin's Creed, with decent parkouring that would really get the series running, and some, well, not very good combat, but if you were stealthy enough, you didn't really have to get into all that much combat, so there's that as well. And the open world stuff, it wasn't too terrible. It was pretty vanilla and standard, but I mean, it was there if you wanted to do it. And overall, I think the missions were actually decent to fun, and it had a lot of interesting mechanics for the time, like the whole hiding in crowds thing, hiding on a bench in public. I thought that was all interesting, and other than Hitman, I can't think of any other stealth games that really do that. Despite being the game that really got the groundwork running for Assassin's Creed, I do think the game is quite repetitive, and I remember the mission structure being not very good in this game, as a lot of the time it was just go to the bureau, get information on someone, and then kill them. And I mean, there's merit in that. I mean, that's kind of what Assassin's Creed has always boiled down to, but they've done it with a certain finesse and interesting ways to make it different, and this game really is just kind of shallow and bare bones in that aspect. But it was still a fun time, and the original Assassin's Creed, I'm honestly surprised they haven't just remade it at this point. Like, if they remake it and maybe fix some of the old systems, I think it could be a pretty solid one, and it'd be even higher on this list. But yeah, the original Assassin's Creed. The next game we have on the list is probably the most unknown Assassin's Creed game. Like, you could barely even call this the main series, this one, but Assassin's Creed Rogue. Now, Assassin's Creed Rogue came out on PS3 and 360 the same day that Unity came out on PS4 and Xbox One. Why they did that, I'm really not sure. It just seemed honestly silly, and then they brought Rogue to everything else anyway, so Yeah, really pointless, honestly. Assassin's Creed Rogue takes place after Assassin's Creed 3 and actually has you playing as a Templar, which is really interesting, and I actually quite like the story in that aspect. It is a different point of view, and sure, it doesn't really go anywhere for the most part, and it isn't all that interesting. It's different enough where I can appreciate it. Now, most of the game takes place in like the Arctic and has you on the boat, the ship to be more precise, and I haven't really talked about the ship in Assassin's Creed in this video. The ship stuff was introduced in the third game. It was okay there, but it's really quite good here, and it is a fun time. They've had some improvements to it, and I think that the Assassin, well, technically the Templar stuff, is actually decent as well. I mean, it's not amazing, but I think it is still quite fun. The reason that it's so far down on this list is because despite the game having a number of positives, the game is ultimately extremely short and is the shortest Assassin's Creed by like a considerable amount, taking maybe like 4 at most 5 hours, and then if you want to do all the Ubisoft side crap, like 7 or 8 hours. Like, there just isn't much to the game, to be honest, and it's kind of a shame because I actually was digging this one a bit. Either way, it is a fun little distraction, and it is different from the other Assassin's Creed, so that's always a plus. But yeah, Assassin's Creed Rogue. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is the next one, and Assassin's Creed Odyssey has a lot going on, a lot of good and a lot of bad. I would say it's a very middling game. For everything it gets right, it gets something wrong usually. Now, the combat I think is actually quite good in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. The stealth is pretty decent, and I think the story is actually somewhat decent as well, with a good main character, as long as you play as Cassandra, of course. A good main character. And the game has a lot going for it if you haven't played Assassin's Creed in quite a long time. It has the Order, it has lots of missions, lots of cool, interesting cameos from Greek mythology people and all that. Like, that stuff is cool. But for all that cool stuff, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is one of the grindiest, just overly long, and ultimately incredibly bloated video games I've ever played. Like, I guess it's cool how much is in the game and how many side quests there are to do and odysseys to have and ship battles to get into and all that. That's cool and all, but damn, this game is grindy. Like, it is overly grindy, and I remember in my review I was very critical about it because they will give you like 10,000 XP for a main mission, and they want you to get like 100,000 XP to level up, and if you're not leveled up, you cannot even fight the enemies that are way higher levels than you. You just can't even fight them. And Ubisoft's response to that is, well, just buy the XP booster where you'll get like 20, 30, 40,000 XP instead of 10,000, which is just a horrible mechanic and ruins, honestly, the entire game for me in a lot of aspects. And I really hate the pacing, and I really hate just how slow everything takes in this game. It takes so slow to do anything because you need to just grind. And it's a shame because, like I said, combat's good, story's cool, order's cool, stealth is decent, parkour finally just feels normal, and yeah, it's a good game, but you just got to be really wary what you're getting into, because this is not a short game. The next game on the list is the newest Assassin's Creed, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and it's pretty clear how I feel about it if it's only in like the middle of this list. Assassin's Creed Valhalla I think is a decent step up from Odyssey, but I really still don't think it's an absolutely mind-blowing, amazing game. I think it's a good game, but it's not far past that. I think it has a decent story, like honestly I'd say Odyssey kind of has a better story. The protagonist Eivor, could take it or leave it. The setting was decent enough. There wasn't really all that much stealth, honestly, in this game, and what's there is pretty basic and honestly feels bare bones for Assassin's Creed. And while the combat is quite good, I will say the combat is definitely better than Odyssey. The biggest thing that Assassin's Creed Valhalla has against it is too much. Like, I know that might seem silly, like, how can you have too much of a game? Well, Assassin's Creed Valhalla just asks the question, what if we just decided to make like one of the longest games ever made? Like one of the longest games ever made. And that's what they did. They made one of the longest games I've ever finished in my life, where I did barely any side stuff, because a lot of the side stuff just isn't very good in Valhalla. It wasn't good in Odyssey for the most part, and it's not very good here, but I did like almost none of the side stuff, really no grinding like at all, and didn't even kill all the Order members, I just took over all the territories, which is what the story's about, taking over the territories. And it took me almost 70 hours to do it. Like, 70 hours is nothing to scoff at. That is a long time. That is almost 2 full work weeks, like, of just all day working. Like, that's a long time, and I don't think the game can keep that pace up. Like, don't get me wrong, the raids are cool when you raid a village. Like, the story's decent, the combat's fun, and the game has a number of stuff going. It has a number of things going for it, for sure, but that just goes on and on and on. This game is just endless, and while I have not actually done a review for this game, I do want to maybe someday just to go on and on about how endless this freaking game is, because it never ends. And that's my biggest problem with the game. It just doesn't know when to end. And if it had ended maybe 40, even like, I don't know, 50 hours earlier, I think it would have been a much better game. Still, though, what's here is decent. I'm going to acknowledge it is still a decent game. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't have put all that much time into it if I didn't have a nice time with it, but you really got to know what you're getting into with this one. Now we're getting into the quite good games. So here's Assassin's Creed Revelations. Now, Assassin's Creed Revelations takes place right after the awesome Brotherhood, and I was really a fan of this one, actually. I really like the setting, I like how the story progresses, I like how both Ezio and Altair are there, and I thought that the Desmond stuff was pretty lame, but luckily it was barely in the game. And Assassin's Creed Revelations doesn't really do all that much new for Assassin's Creed, and felt almost like a kind of standalone expansion rather than a full-blown sequel, but I still think what it had quite well done. It was definitely the refining kind of game, where they really try to refine what was good about the previous couple games. And while I don't think it's honestly as good as the previous couple games, I still think it is a fun time nonetheless. The Hook Blade was a decent addition, and the game's ending I thought was actually decently powerful, especially with everything going on with Altair. I thought that was pretty sick. But Assassin's Creed Revelations, I don't have all that much to say about it because it's just a solid open world game. It has decent missions, it has a decent combat system, and it has alright stealth. Like, it just does everything well. It doesn't do anything particularly like amazing, but it is just a good game overall. It is a good game. The next Assassin's Creed we have here is Brotherhood. Now, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is really what a lot of people consider the peak of Assassin's Creed, and in terms of its systems, I'll be honest, it probably is. As I think that Assassin's Creed Brotherhood just did almost everything right, honestly, especially for the time. I think Ezio is just easily the best protagonist, like, of all the Assassins. Like, it's not even close, and Ubisoft knows that too. And he is really just on, like, another level in this game. He's awesome in this game. The story's quite good, and I really can appreciate what the story does and how it progresses. Like, it was really good. It really was. And the open world of Rome, that was a pretty good open world. Like, it wasn't too big, and it always had interesting stuff to see. The side stuff was actually decent in this game, and it introduced a number of little aspects that wouldn't honestly really come back for some reason, like summoning your own assassins, and just some of the stealth kills you could do in this game. I really quite liked it, and I really thought that Assassin's Creed Brotherhood really just took what made Assassin's Creed 2 cool, and it just built on top of it. And yeah, it's just a solid game. I will say that this was when the series was kind of leaning a little too hard into the tailing missions. I noticed that there are a number of tailing missions in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, but aside from that, again, it is a really solid game, and it just stands the test of time of being a really good open world game and how to do a really nice open world game. Oh yeah, and the horses are just straight R-word in this game. They're dumb as shit. And in the number 3 spot, we have Assassin's Creed Origins. Now, Assassin's Creed Origins was the first of this new style of Assassin's Creed that Odyssey and Valhalla follow, where they try to make it more like an RPG and, just to be honest, more like The Witcher. But I think Assassin's Creed Origins actually just did it way better than Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla. While the combat I don't think is as good as those games, I think the story was definitely the best of the 3, and the setting was also the best. Like, Egypt, oh dude, that is so sick, and Bayek was actually a pretty good protagonist, I thought. I thought he was cool, and I thought his family was cool, and seeing the start of the Assassins was also quite cool. And I thought that the game does something that Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla should do. It just ends. Assassin's Creed Origins is not a 50, 60, 70, 80 hour RPG. No, Assassin's Creed Origin just ends. Never feeling grindy, with decent side content, and sure, you do have to do a little bit of it, I'm not gonna lie. But it wasn't awful, and it just ends before it gets stupidly repetitive, taking only around like 20 or so hours. And I think that this was ultimately a really great change for the Assassin's Creed series, because Syndicate was just the most stale thing. And going from that to Origins, big step up, and I think that they really captured the best parts of The Witcher, and it wasn't overly bloated and endless. And while I think Odyssey and Valhalla really failed to live up to that standard that Origins set, I still think Origins is the best of those three, and in terms of new Assassin's Creed games, I think it's the best one. And I think that if you want to have someone try the new style of Assassin's Creed games to see if they like it, to maybe get into Valhalla or Odyssey, I would definitely just say, honestly, play Origins. If you play Origins, you'll see what the series is at its best in this new incarnation of Assassin's Creed. And again, I'm really glad that they changed up the series to what this game had, because Syndicate, yeah, it was just stale. Great game. And here we are with the fan favorite, the blockbuster Assassin's Creed 2. Now, Assassin's Creed 2, while it isn't the most refined, and a lot of the sequels have improved everything Assassin's Creed 2 did, nothing can understate the impact Assassin's Creed 2 had and the story. I think the story of Assassin's Creed 2 is the best story in the whole series. Like, I think it's not even close. I think Ezio's tale, how he grows up, how he gets into the assassins, and even the real world stuff. Even the real world stuff was good. And I just think it's the best that Assassin's Creed has ever done. And the story really can carry the game up to nearly the top spot, honestly, for all the Assassin's Creed games. But don't worry, not just the story is awesome, as the gameplay is great also. The setting is just amazing in Italy, and I really loved all of the settings in Assassin's Creed 2, and I thought it was just so unique, especially compared to anything else out on the market. When I think of Assassin's Creed, I'm thinking of usually Assassin's Creed 2, as I think the stealth was really well done. They had really gotten a foothold from the first Assassin's Creed game and said, we're going to make this interesting, we're going to have a great plot, we're going to have excellent pacing, and it's not just going to be go to target, spy on target, kill target. No, they've made it much more interesting, and I just really liked everything that this game did. And it's just kind of shocking how Ubisoft was never really able to capture that magic again. Like, don't get me wrong, they did a lot of great things in Brotherhood and Revelations and all that, but the magic Assassin's Creed 2 has is unparalleled. Even after all these years, like, when I played it a year or two ago, that was the first time I'd ever actually played the game, and I was just almost blown away with how just good it is. Like, what a great open world, and it's hard to believe what Ubisoft has done with their modern games, as this open world is just excellent, and I think their most modern Ubisoft open world games are really lacking what this game did. And Assassin's Creed 2, like, I really don't have anything else much to say about it, because everything's already been said about it. You know it's an amazing game, and you know it's the fan favorite. Let's get on to number 1, which is pretty obvious. And at number 1 we have the much-loved Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Now, in terms of being an Assassin's Creed game, I don't think that this is the best Assassin's Creed game. I think that's the second one. But being the best overall game, yeah, I think it's Assassin's Creed 4. I think Assassin's Creed 4 is just one of the best open-world games ever created, and one of the best action-adventure games, and no one will deny this one. It's the best pirate game ever made. Like, I didn't know that this was going to be the direction Ubisoft would take with Assassin's Creed, but I loved it. I really enjoyed Assassin's Creed 4 for its pirate mechanics, its ship battles. Like, it was all a really fun time. Edward was a real swashbuckling protagonist, and I think he was a cool dude. He wasn't the best of the Assassin's Creed series, but he was still a good one, and I'm kind of surprised they didn't ever continue with him, honestly, as I thought his story was quite good and the way everything progressed was cool. And I really liked the pirating aspect. Like, they really went all in with the pirating stuff, and I really liked that. And I think that the ship combat has never gotten as good as it was, honestly, in Assassin's Creed 4. Like, it's just so engaging, and it's always a fun time. And it's the best ship combat of, like, any game, especially any open world game. And why Ubisoft hasn't like really capitalized this, or maybe they're trying to, with Skulls and Bones or whatever that game's called. But it's a great time. And sure, the Assassin's Creed stuff, I really am not actually that big on. I think there's way too much tailing in this game, and I think all the assassin side missions are just not very good. But all the treasure plunking and all the pirate stuff really makes up for it to just be my favorite game in the series. Like, it really just is such a blast, and one of my favorite open world games. And again, to repeat what I said, in terms of being an actual Assassin's Creed game, it's not the best. It really isn't. But the best overall game, oh yeah. And I definitely had the most fun with it. One of the better open world games. And if you had to play just one game in the series, it should be this one, for sure. And that about does it with this video. I hope you guys enjoyed me ranking the Assassin's Creed games. These are all the main ones. I know there's a bunch of side ones, like the 2D ones and Liberation and all that, but I am so Assassin's Creed out. I really don't honestly want to play another one. I played Valhalla, and then that was just honestly a mistake. But regardless, I had a fun time making this list. I had a fun time playing all these games. If you haven't commented what your favorite Assassin's Creed game is, or your favorite couple, what are you waiting for, man? And if you like the video, I really would recommend you subscribe, because I do lots of ranking videos now for lots of games, and I would really recommend you subscribe. There's a Patreon if you want to give me some money, but I mean, that's up to you. No pressure there. But at the very least, your ass better be, if you made it to this point of the video, you better be commenting what your favorite Assassin's Creed game is. Like, I'm gonna know. I'm gonna know if you didn't comment. I'm gonna find you. I know where you live. Have a good Christmas, or, well, New Year, or whatever the hell you're gonna celebrate. Have a good one.